I just want to find 11,780 votes. In extraordinary hour-long call, Trump pressurized Georgia's Secretary of State to recalculate the vote in his favor. You're very welcome to the first polling station of 2021 with Johnny Ward and the main man, William Kedjanyi, who is struggling like the rest of us through yet another lockdown and trying to get his head around what is going on in Georgia and in the head of Donald Trump in general. William, first of all, Happy New Year. But second of all, this was truly extraordinary journalism by the Washington Post, and actually somewhat believable what you read in it, in that Trump is effectively capable of anything in trying to hold on to power.
Yeah, absolutely, and Happy New Year to everybody watching. So this was a remarkable piece of journalism by Amy Gardner of the Washington Post. It confirmed what was suspected, but even then, it still managed to go beyond that. This hour-long phone call basically starts with one of Trump's favourite excuses, which is that his rally sizes were bigger than Joe Biden's. As such, he could not have lost the election fair and square. Then it goes down a number of different rabbit holes, especially to do with these massively inflated voter turnout figures, which he continually cites from nowhere. But Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger stayed strong, backed by his lawyer Ryan Germany, and in the end, it won't be much to do about nothing. There is a lot in that phone call any federal prosecutor will be very interested in, but I don't think we're going to see any sort of overturning of the vote anywhere. I think I haven't said this so far, really, because even at some point I've been a bit scared of Trump launching something from below the scenes, but I think it's done. I think we can now say we pretty much know the makeup of the next Houses of Congress, and also definitely now the next president-elect.
Of course, you did mention Georgia, which is the start of our topic discussion today. What is the latest?
Okay, so at this point in time, we can say confidently that Raphael Warnock has won and that Jon Ossoff has joined him, meaning that there will be 50 senators who caucus with the Democrats and 50 who caucus with the Republicans, but Kamala Harris, vice president-elect, soon to be vice president, will have the tie-breaking vote. In other words, Democrats have the Senate, they have the House, and they have the White House, and the first 18 months or so of Joe Biden's presidency have just changed. This is absolutely huge, and there's no other way really to put it. Huge not only for Biden's immediate presidency, in the fact that he will have a chance to do many of the things on his agenda and to bring bills to the floor of the Senate, but also in the sense that going forward, this is going to pretty substantially change the scope of his performance. And looking ahead to 2024 and, of course, the next midterms, that changes a lot. It changes, I think, how effective a President Biden can be. It probably changes the fortunes, not only for the Democratic contenders there, but also for the Republicans too. And the GOP now has an issue. Trumpism bought it gains. It did. They got them the White House. They performed still much better on the ballot than was expected. But it also has cost them pretty significantly. And it's interesting to note that in the era of Trumpism, if we define it as 4 years from 2016 to now, elections where Trump was on the ballot, i.e. the 2016 presidential election, and even to a point the election just gone, he beat his polling averages and he performed well in the party brand, even though it was tarnished by lots of the activity, etc., got what it wanted cynically. Other elections, i.e. the midterms and a couple of races like these, have seen the GOP really suffer because of Trump. And you're at a crossroads now. Several senators would owe their seats to Trump voters, certainly lots in the House. But if you can lose 2 seats in Georgia, despite all of the money spent and despite all of the attacks to a very young person who just finished being a journalist in Jon Ossoff, and to black preacher in, Reverend Raphael Warnock. That's a crossroads for the GOP, and it's a difficult question. I've said a lot on this program that they can continue, or they will continue with Trumpism in some form, as long as it gives them the benefits. But the US is changing, especially demographically, and if you're losing Senate runoffs in Georgia, there may be some thinking to be had, even for a party that I think it's fair to say is nakedly as cynical as the GOP.
And how was this in terms of the betting beforehand?
We saw quite a big shift, and this is really interesting because it's yet another phenomenon of late money sort of being the right predictor. In much the same way that you have sometimes for races before the off, the market saw it late. So on the weekend before the call, you could have gotten 8 to 11 the Republicans winning both races, and you could have got 19 to 10 Democrats. Left was 8 to 15, Warnock was 11 to 8, Ossoff was 6 to 4, Perdue was 1 to 2. A couple of days later, that's all flipped on its head. We went off evens before the polls closed on the Democrats actually winning both seats. It was basically evens each of 2, and by that time, Ossoff and Perdue were 10 to 11 joints each of 2, and Warnock went off 1 to 2 to beat Leffler. I mean, that was a pretty sizable turnaround. Now, the polling had the Democrats ahead, but again, this was margin of error stuff, and there was much less of it around than there was for Georgia as a state in the November election.
Where do we go from here then? In terms of the 2021 for Joe Biden and American politics, it's going to be fascinating, like baptisms of fire all over the place, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, the cabinet now becomes really, really crucial and all that stuff, because he has a Senate that will be able to appoint. One of the big dangers was would the Republican Senate pass something like, I'm pulling a name out of the hat here, but would you have been able to get Stacey Abrams to be, chief attorney or something like that? Or would you have been able to get, say, Pete Buttigieg to be transportation secretary? All of that stuff now, even if it's on a knife edge, I'd imagine Biden has that scope. It means he can bring legislation to the floor. I think the first thing to do will be the coronavirus stimulation package, paychecks of £2,000 per person, dollars per person. Along with that, there's more scope for him to undo what Trump did more quickly. I can imagine actions on climate change will be something that the left caucuses, the Democratic Socialists, are calling for. And I think we'll also see a little bit more ambition. I don't think anything crazy in terms of like the first 18 months. He's got the vaccine rollout to give. He's got the economic recovery. He's got to just get his feet under the table. But I definitely think there's scope to be a bit more ambitious. And that's important. And that will have a big effect on the midterms next time around, when I believe the seats that are set to be up for grabs are far less favourable to Democrats.
In terms of Trump, just from a selfish perspective, I kind of hope, I hope he has a bad year in many respects. I think he's done a disservice to people during his term in office. But how much of a concern are all these legal battles that he's inevitably going to face?
Yeah, they're a big concern for him, especially at a state level. Federal, I mean, he could technically, I think, pardons and stuff are still open to him, but he's only president for a few more days now. I think it's actually 2 weeks today. Biden will be inaugurated. So that'll be a tricky matter for him going ahead. I think it's something that punters should watch too, if only because Trump is still the favourite to be the 2024 nominee, I believe, for the GOP. No, sorry, he's not the favourite, but he's 13 to 2 to win the 2024 presidential election, and I think about 7 to 2 to be nominated. That's obviously a long way away, but if you do think he can come back, I'd wait a few months or so. I do not think he will shorten drastically, but if he gets in significant legal troubles, I think making some sort of political run may be beyond this scope.
There seems to be a little bit of a movement in the Scottish independence referendum, and just off the top of my head, it's now yes to independence if there were a vote for the end of 2025, even money, no to independence, 8 to 11. I guess this is in relation to Brexit having happened, and we're kind of trying to deal with the repercussions of that. But whatever about Donald Trump, this is a fascinating year ahead for the Conservatives, for British people in general. Boris is obviously, trying to deal with whatever wave this is of the coronavirus. We have the strain, Brexit is going on, and you have an economy that's obviously, going to have an interesting year as well. What can you tell us?
So we have had moves towards Scottish independence, both on the timescales you said and also the results. Brexit taking place will be a part of that, namely because we are past the point of no return. We're out and it's done, and now things will begin to take effect. What I would say is this is probably going to be a bigger impact on specific Scottish industries, such as, for instance, seafood and food and drink or whatever, rather than Scottish people overall, whilst we're still in a lockdown. But when you get out of that lockdown, maybe into the sort of high summer, into the early autumn, people might begin to feel more tangible effects of that. That'll be interesting. By then, we'll have had Holyrood elections, which the SNP should win and should win handsomely. So there will be a renewed mandate, there'll be more pressure. I should say, I still don't think this government is going to give a Scottish independence referendum, but that in much the same way that governments refusing to give in the Brexit referendum here did keep the movement going, I think that will have the same effect. And there's a much louder call for Scottish independence again now than there was for Brexit, I think, even in the lead up to the European elections where UKIP really took hold. This is not something that's going to go away. It's something I think that's going to continue on, and it will be exaggerated, I think, just by the issues of the day. And also, while Scotland has suffered through COVID, like all nations of the UK have, the disconnect still between Westminster and Holyrood there, and the difference in appearance between Boris Johnson and Nicola Sturgeon is also going to keep driving that gap for as long as Boris Johnson is Prime Minister.
Why would somebody want to back him to stay until 2024 or later at 11 to 10, which I think is probably quite optimistic considering the person we're dealing with here. 2021, 9 to 4, Boris Johnson leave office. What has to happen for him to leave this year if you want to back 9 to 4?
Something pretty unprecedented. I mean, I think a vaccine rollout failure and a complete sort of mess with Brexit are probably his two big threats. Regarding the vaccine rollouts, the mid-February target, I think, is optimistic because there are issues with things such as glass vials and the manufacture of them or whatever. But there is support for lockdown. It's across all age groups. It's across all political divides. I imagine that will probably hold until at least the February half term. And then if schools can't go back, I think there'll be more agitation. But if this is the last push we need to make, I imagine there'll be public consent for that. Regarding Brexit, I think you're going to find the effect takes place slowly at first and more quickly. Now, again, this very much depends on sort of what you need from the EU and British business and what you buy or what you sell. But my main thinking with Brexit would be that it will take a bit of time for that effect to hold. I mean, I should say Johnson has, we have 2 vaccines now, and he's avoided the no-deal Brexit. Those are probably the biggest threats. I think the price on him to stay until 2024 actually is fair, given that as long as this lockdown manages to work, which is not a certainty, but which one would hope so in tandem with the vaccine, he shouldn't face such pressure from his backbenchers again, although plenty are privately not happy at the idea of having to go until, say, end of March for these restrictions. As to be fair, I'm sure it's something weighing on the minds of most of the public. we have been through these cycles for about 12 months now, both in Ireland where you are and where we are here, in fact, everywhere. I think public opinion in terms of COVID will have some effect on the betting markets, but I don't think that will be the case just yet. Not just yet would be my thinking.
So before we finish up, what markets do you expect to be forming over the year? For those who are interested in political betting, what does the year have in store in general?
Okay, so lots of domestic stuff. Now, the local elections look likely to be delayed. We can see them taking place in the autumn rather than in May, understandable reasons, but we will be betting on them, and I'm very, very excited for them. We have lots of mayoral elections, West Midlands Mayor, Manchester Mayor, Andy Street and Andy Burnham respectively hold those positions. We of course have the London mayoral election, where Sadiq Khan is a 6 ons shot. I imagine there'll be a lot of discourse around that this year. Other local elections where we'll hopefully price things up close to the time. So busy year in the UK whilst we track the other long-term markets. Overseas, we'll be looking at European domestic politics as well. We'll hopefully be doing more reactive stuff, media markets especially. There has been a new BBC chairman announced, by the way, Richard Sharp, which is a shame because we had the market up overnight. And lots of stuff will come along the road. There have been plenty of entire episodes of the polling station built entirely upon things that even a day or two before did not exist. So looking forward to it.
I guess we just have to tell viewers as well to keep their heads up, and what is quite, January can be a trying month, particularly so in current circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a general public health message, but do check in on your friends and have your friends check in on you. It's going to be a pretty grim couple of months, but
you always have Johnny and William.
Always have Johnny and William. You always have all of the friendship and support of the Star family, but do check in on each other. Follow the rules as best you can, and with that, hopefully, we can look forward to a better spring and summer.
Indeed, and check in on the polling station next week. Thank you for watching, and thank you, William.
Thank you very much for having me. Keep safe out there.